Well, hello, this is Jeff Gaudiosi, and you're on misplacedstraws.com where music comes to life. And my guest today has spent nearly a decade as the vocalist for one of the first and arguably the most successful tribute bands in the world, the Australian Pink Floyd show. The band is on the road hitting the US and Canada now through September, including a stop right here in Connecticut. Here to talk about the tour, vocalist Chris Barnes. Welcome, Chris.
Hello, thanks for having me on the show. Great to
Oh,
be here.
my pleasure. And let's start with this tour. Is there a theme or an album that you guys will be emphasizing this time around, or is it more of a greatest hits kind of package?
Yeah, it is more of a greatest hits package. Obviously, last year we were doing Dark Side because it was its 50th anniversary, and next year is Wish You Were Here's 50th anniversary. So this is obviously advertised as a kind of like a greatest hits. So we're covering everything from the Syd Barrett era right through all the pre-Dark Side stuff, the experimental period, right through the big albums of the 70s to the Gilmour era of the 80s and 90s. Although it is the 30th anniversary of the Division Bell,
Yep.
we are kind of doffing the cap to that album and playing a couple of tracks, one of which we've never played before, which has been quite special, actually, just to catch people unawares that we suddenly break into this song that people don't expect. And it's going down really, really well.
Oh, come on. Which song is it?
That's Marooned, the instrumental
Nice.
from Division Bell. So I'm not on that one, so I get to just stand at the side of the stage and watch Luke play the guitar, and it's just magical. Yeah, it's a wonderful piece of music. It really is.
I have to say, when it comes to Division Bell, Keep Talking has always been one of my favorite songs ever. And love that track off that record.
Yeah, it's a great album. It
Yeah.
really is. I mean, I can remember that's, I'm of a certain age where I remember that album actually coming out
Yeah.
and being a big noise in '94. Yeah, I was 17 then. And I remember it getting to number one and hearing like Take It Back and all this new era of Floyd.
Yeah.
And then see the BBC put a documentary on and then showed what became the Pulse concert at Earl's Court, and recording that on a VHS and just watching it over and over again because they play Dark Side all the way through on that. And that was a huge thing. This is a pre-internet era where you weren't even sure how many albums they released or what the albums were called. Or yeah, it was a really special time when that came out. Great album.
And now the band's been around for quite a while before you became involved with them. But how did you first hook up with the band?
So my introduction to the Aussie Floyd came about through I ran a children's music work. Well, I ran a children's music workshop in the town where I lived at the time, and the drummer's daughter was one of the pupils there. And I was aware of the band. I'd seen them several times, and she was like, "Oh, my dad's the drummer in Aussie Floyd." I knew who he was straight away, and then he came back from a tour and came in and he helped out. And whenever he was off tour, he would come in and play, teach drums, And one night, we were packing the equipment up and we were chatting and stuff, and I was telling him all about the things I'd done, and it turned out we were it turns out we were both at the same university studying music, but we were a year apart, so we didn't know each other. And we were talking about mutual friends we had or whatever, and he was just chatting, and I had like a really big interest in Pink Floyd, and I think he just said to me that night, "Oh, if ever there was an opening, would you be interested?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I would." But it took a bit of time. It took a couple of, I think about 4 years or something. But in the meantime, the kids from the music workshop got on stage with the band and sang, the "We Don't Need No Education" part of Another Brick in the Wall Part 2, all in their school uniforms with their ties and stuff, marching on the stage. And my daughter was one of those people, as was his daughter. And yeah, so that was just really cool. So through that, I got to meet the band and hang out with them and stuff. And did that a couple of years with them. And I was kind of on the radar then at that point. So I just had to bide my time, as they say.
And now, how do you prepare for something like this? Obviously, you were a fan, but did you ever get to see the band live? Did you go back and watch videos? How did you prepare how you approach your songs?
What you mean, had I seen Aussie Floyd live?
Yes.
Or you mean Pink Floyd?
No, had you seen Pink Floyd live?
No, I hadn't. No, I couldn't afford to go to London to watch that concert I mentioned that was shown on the BBC. But I'd been aware of Pink Floyd since a very early age. My brother and I were left a record collection when our cousin who lived with us for a while moved out and just left a load of stuff. And in there was Relics, which is this early compilation with some Syd Barrett stuff and some, early when Gilmour had just joined. So it's kind of like 67 to 69. And I remember my brother Craig putting on Arnold Lane and, really liking this kind of pop song essentially. And then he, obviously being up 6 years older than he knew, and Instant Overdrive came on and it terrified me. I was only about 5 or 6 and he turned the light off in the bedroom and stopped me like going near the light switch, and there'd be all these crazy noises and squeaks and feedback and all this crazy stuff. And I'd just be absolutely beside myself with fear. And then that's what I thought Pink Floyd were: pop songs and scary instrumentals. Because I think, Careful With That Axe Eugene's on there as well, and that's got that scream in the middle. And like, what is this music? And then I saw when I was in my early teens, I saw the Pompeii concert on the TV, sorry, and just watched it going, oh, this is that band off that album. But I don't know any of these songs, and the first thing's Echoes, and that just blew me away. And I think by the end of watching that concert from Pompeii, I was just in. That was it. Then I think I went out and bought Medal. I found an album that Echoes was on. I bought Medal like kind of that month or that summer or something. I can't remember exactly. And another friend of mine, we both would find out what album titles there were, and we'd buy one each and cassette copy across. And then another friend had an uncle with a big record collection, so I remember giving him a cassette and he copied me Atom Heart Mother when I was like, what is this? What's this brass section? There was such an interesting journey to go on, because I say, like, pre-internet, you didn't know the history or that Syd Barrett had left. And I've probably thought that Syd Barrett was the guy singing on Echoes. I didn't know. It's innocent times. We've got the world at our fingertips these days. But back in those days, when you're trying to find like a guitar magazine, you're rushing. Oh, right. Well, what pedals did he use? Right. What's the fuzz
for it?
Yeah. What's a Benson Eckerett? What is that? Innocent times.
Now, at least here in the US, I mean, tribute bands are everywhere. There's the ones that try to look like the band and the ones that just play the songs. You guys are very different. You're really an immersive experience into the band. Talk a bit about the sound and visuals that you guys use.
Okay, well, when the band was formed back in 1988, they kind of set out this blueprint of, it's not going to be about us, the individuals. It's about the music. The music is doing the talking, not, the people on the stage kind of thing. And using because let's face it, Floyd were kind of anonymous in the 70s. No one really knew what they looked like. They didn't do lots of TV interviews or TV. They didn't appear on, the Tonight Show or something talking about an album. They were very. They came from an underground kind of background, so they were kind of anonymous in many ways. And I think because nobody's wearing a wig, and Pink Floyd didn't have like an iconic frontman like a Freddie Mercury or a Mick Jagger running around on the stage, so the need to sort of dress up doesn't really exist. Everyone wears black really on stage. All the guys wear black. The girls, the backing vocalists, might wear like a different coloured dress or something, because that was a later feature of like with Floyd later on, when they expanded and they had backing vocalists and a sax player, and then expanded with an extra guitarist and then an extra keyboard and so on and so on. But really, it is following that blueprint that Floyd kind of set down. And when the Aussies got the band together, the original guys, still to this day, we follow to the letter their kind of ethos of, right, we're going to play it like this. It's going to be like the album. It's not about how many notes I can play on the guitar or listen to my vocal range or something like that. We serve this music. It's an honor to play this music in the same way that an orchestra would do. You go and watch a classical concert. No one's like, hey, look who's on third violin. That's, it's not about that. It's the music is the most important thing. But obviously, hand in hand with that comes the fact that Floyd were a pioneering live production monolith touring the world, and our show is a replication of what you would expect to see if you went to see Pink Floyd, the circle screen with the films, really big light show that goes in sync with the music and the lasers and inflatables, and it's a multimedia experience. You're not just watching some guys in the corner of a room playing some songs. It's unique in that respect.
And when it comes to your vocal, do you base your performance on the record, or are there certain live records or live performances where you're like, okay, that's a definitive version, that's what I'm going to base my vocal on?
Obviously the album is the most important. Certainly from the big four albums of Dark Side, Wish, Animals, The Wall. That's the thing that everybody knows. Sometimes with some earlier material, pre-Dark Side stuff, you could possibly, for instance, when we played Fat Old Son, on the album it's kind of 5-6 minutes, but their live arrangements used to stretch out to 15 minutes. So we created from various bootlegs, we cherry picked various sections that we liked, and we would create on a computer, like creating like a Cubase session or whatever, this definitive version of that we then learned. And certain vocal inflections Gilmour performed on that night, I might have incorporated that were more from the live version than the studio version. But as I say, that's an early track that might be lesser known that was expanded live. You certainly wouldn't think, oh, well, we'll do Money tonight, but I'll sing it differently because I can. It's no one's interested in that. No one's interested in what I do. It's about playing that music as it was on the album.
Mm-hmm. Over the years, a lot of musicians who have been involved with Pink Floyd have also been involved with you guys. Some of the core members have essentially blessed the band, it seems. How important is it for you guys to have that vote of confidence from the people that were there, that played with the band, that were part of the band?
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's well known that the band were booked to play for David Gilmour's 50th birthday party back in '96, and that, to me, I wasn't in the band then, but I've heard so much about that night that I can only imagine what was going through the band's minds at that point. It must have been both amazing and extremely nerve-wracking at the same time. And obviously we have Lorelei McBroom as one of our backing vocalists, and she toured with the band in '87 and later in '89. And when no one's kind of, how can I put it? No one has sort of gone out and said, "Oh, it's this band, not this band that I like." It's not about that. Pink Floyd really aren't those kind of guys. They're very reserved, and they're not a kind of picking sides kind of band. I mean, I will just say a little story that when Nick Mason got the Sauce Full of Secrets off the ground, we went to see one of his warm-up gigs in a pub in London, and there was a few hundred people there, and about 6 or 7 of us from the band were watching. And after about 5 or 6 songs, Nick stood up and addressed the audience and said, "Oh, it's kind of strange. This, I feel like I'm in my own tribute band." And then he paused and went, "Perhaps this should be the Australian Nick Mason show." And obviously, no one in the audience knew who we were because we're nobody. But like, we kind of looked at each other and like, "Oh," like a little chuckle to ourselves. But yeah, Nick said lovely things about us in the press, and that's very kind of him. And Nick is the only member of the band I've ever met. I met him at a book signing, and this is before I joined the band, and he's a delight. He's so nice. He's a lovely guy. So yeah, I think that kind of answered your question.
Yeah, well, definitely. We're at a point now too where a lot of the classic rock bands that everyone grew up with or remembers hearing either can't tour anymore or don't tour anymore. And there are generations of fans who are never able to see Pink Floyd. And even if you caught the later Gilmour years, or you didn't catch the full band, you guys are about as close as someone can get in terms of the visual that we talked about and the sound. Do you sort of feel a responsibility to bring that full experience to the most of your crowd probably never saw them, so you guys are it when it comes to hearing these songs
I see it as someone once said in the band, I can't remember, I think it might have been Luke, one of the guitar players, said, "It's an honor to play this music." and it is in many ways, you know, you're kind of just this conduit for this great music being played to a crowd, and gauging from looking out at people. There are obviously people who saw the band back when they were an actual functioning entity, and obviously there are people kind of my age and younger, some like the age of my children, who are watching us, maybe been brought by their parents or grandparents, or maybe just come off their own, you know, volition. And I think that's amazing that this music is just going to continue generation after generation, because it still stays relevant. It's not, to use a phrase, it's not some old hippie music, or it's, you know, Roger's lyrics were really profound and really, you know, hit the sweet spot, certainly on Dark Side. And those themes that he talked about the pressures of modern life, are still relevant to this day. You know, there's no kind of reference to something that happened in 1973 that people today will, well, what does that mean? You know, all right, everybody might not know what a Learjet is, but you know,
Yeah.
That's probably the only thing I could think of off the top of my head.
Yeah. One trend I'm starting to see a little bit, at least here in the US, is some tribute bands are beginning to branch out to original music that's inspired by the band that they were performing. Have you guys ever considered doing any kind of original music, either with Australian Pink Floyd, or do you do anything on your own outside of it?
Not as a band as such. I mean, we spend 6 or 7 months of the year together. I think the idea of going in a recording studio together would make and everybody lives all over the planet as well. We've got people literally all over Europe and all over the States. So it's kind of logistically impossible. But through the wonders of technology, if somebody did write something and say, you know, I could really do with some saxophone on this, and they could send it to Alex in Chicago and he could stick his sax on it or whatever. But no, not as a 10-piece band. We've never sort of sat, and we get asked that quite a lot. Have you never written anything together? But this takes up so much of your life every year that a lot of the time there isn't time to contemplate sitting down and getting together and, oh, I've got these lyrics or whatever. Everybody does things. Everyone does like little bits. I mean, most of my spare time on tour is spent sort of tinkering around on a laptop, coming up with various things. But no one's got any, you know, desires to be the next Taylor Swift or, you know, Harry Styles or something. You know, we're just kind of just, this is our focus, this is our purpose, and this just keeps you from sitting in the pub all day.
Well,
not that everybody does that. I just want to clarify, we're not a bunch of alcoholics touring the world.
We've been spending some time here with Chris Barnes from the Australian Pink Floyd show. The band is on tour through North America now through the month of September, and then you guys hit Europe later on. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time to do this, and hopefully I can catch you in a couple of weeks when you come through Connecticut.
Yeah, definitely. That would be great. We could have a chat about those guitars.
You know it. Thanks a lot, my friend. We'll talk soon.
Okay, thank you. Yep. Cheers.
Bye.